So we've walked further down to this next lock down and just waiting for the light now. We've got a little while before the light gets above the hills beyond you, behind you there. So it's just going to be a case of waiting around to see what happens. Hopefully we'll get some nice warm light. There isn't any atmosphere, which I was kind of hoping for. I thought there might be a bit of fog, something like that, because it was really cold last night. But nothing. So all we can really hope for is we're getting some clouds coming over now. Hopefully those will start to light up and at least give us something. So yeah, just a waiting game now, really. So just found a composition here now, and I'm just kind of doing it frantically, trying to get this camera mount on so you can see what I'm looking at. But basically, if I describe it to you, we have the mountain range off in the distance, and it's just catching first light because the sun's rising from behind us here. And the tops of the hills are just catching that kiss of first light. And then I've got different layers. We've got the pine trees. Of course, I've just moved the camera trying to get this sorted. We've got the pine trees in the first layer, then another mountain range behind that, and then the mountain range that's illuminated is beyond that. So that's the idea of the shot. If I tell you the settings at the minute that I'm on, it's 1/60th of a second. And hang on, I just need to adjust this. In fact, I'm going to change that altogether because I'm having it underexposed so that I don't blow out those highlights that are hitting the hills on the top there. So I'm actually at a 25th of a second, f16, ISO 100. So I'm just going to get this plugged in. And then you'll be able to see what I'm looking at. Just bear with me a minute. But absolutely beautiful this morning, really is. But things just, these sort of things happen really quickly, so you've just got to kind of bear with it for the minute. Right, if I press record now. So what you should see is I've got this 4:3 aspect ratio, and you'll see there's different layers. If I bring up the exposure a bit, I just raise my ISO a bit, you'll see the foreground then. So you'll see I've got two layers. I've got the first layer of trees, the next layer of mountain, and beyond that, if I just lower the exposure, you'll start to see the mountain beyond, which is just being illuminated. Now there's a beautiful cloud above it as well, dark clouds, which are just helping to add that bit of depth and a bit of drama and atmosphere to it. So yeah, simple enough shot. When I first saw it, I thought it's quite a nice square crop, but then I opened it right up to the full frame and it just looks really, really nice. So I'm going to go with that one. So yeah, just waiting for that light to illuminate and those clouds just to move across a little bit more, and then I'll grab that shot. And here it is. So that was a beautiful start to the day, some lovely light in here. And we're just waiting for it now because there's some cloud behind you and the sun's just come up over the mountain range and now it's stuck in some cloud. But I did grab a couple of shots over here with a long lens. There's some of the pine trees, there's two pine trees over here together and they worked really, really well, but it was like a split second, so I didn't really get a chance to walk you through any of it because it just happened so fast. And sometimes that's the way, especially at this time of the morning, the light changes so quickly, it's really quite hard to kind of walk you through it. But I think this shot was actually definitely worth it because it just got that first bit of warm light, and the reeds down in the lower section of the image really glowed as well, so I think that would work well. Anyway, here's that shot that I just grabbed.
Using a telephoto lens in landscape photography? Here are some tips to level up your shots. First, always use a tripod to avoid shake. If you're hand holding, make sure to enable image stabilization for smoother shots. Shoot during golden hour for the best lighting, although this isn't totally necessary. Focus on details like textures or distant features. Experiment with compression to bring distant elements closer. Remember to use a narrow aperture for sharp focus and capture beautiful bokeh with a shallow depth of field. Keep an eye on weather conditions, as telephoto lenses can exaggerate haze. Shoot in manual mode for full control over your exposure and focus. Also, try long exposures for a dreamy effect, and frame your shots with intention to make your compositions pop.
So I've just walked along the loch shore a bit more and found this group of birch trees here, and they're absolutely beautiful, all gnarly and twisty and crowding over into the scene. The main one is back here behind me in this, it's almost like a valley. It comes into like a point and it's just sitting up and leaning over towards my left here. There's another tree behind me here, which is this one here, which is kind of leaning into the frame as well from the right hand side of the frame. It works really nicely because we're getting the sun coming up from behind you over that direction now, and it's just illuminating these trees, giving them nice soft light. But what I'm going to do is take you to the back of the camera and I'll be able to show you the frame better. Now, I've tried it in 4:3 aspect ratio. I've also tried it in my crop pano as well, and I'm going to see which one works best. But I'll get you back over there and you can see what I'm looking at. So I'll show you this frame that I've got lined up now. Now what you'll see, this is the 4:3 version, and you'll see I've got these grasses in the front of the frame here, which I quite like. There's the grasses and the heather that obviously isn't blooming yet, it's not the time of year, but it just adds that bit of texture in the foreground. And then that leads into that group of trees, and as you can see, that trees are leaning in from the right frame. And then on the other side, I've balanced it out with some trees that are kind of almost leaning out of the frame towards the left. And then the tree in the middle of the frame, which is the gnarly one, is also leaning left as well. So I just think it works really well. You'll also see if I move my focus point over here, this branch, which is kind of a broken branch, is also leaning in like a hand coming this way, which works really, really well. Now it works as a 4:3 because it includes all those grasses, but if I change that now, you'll see what I'm looking at. If I change it to the crop pano, you'll see it kind of gets rid of those grasses, and if I just raise it up a touch, there we go, it gets rid of the grasses and you still get that tree that's kind of the dominant one, which is in the middle of the frame there. I'm just not sure which but works best. I'm possibly leaning towards the 4:3, but I don't know. They both work to me anyway, especially when you get that bit of light that just kind of illuminates everything and gives it more of a 3D feel. But I'm just going to grab that shot now and I'll pop both shots up side by side and let me know which one you prefer, the 4:3 or the pano crop. So, now that I've grabbed that shot, I'm looking for other bits of shots that I can find to work with. And right down on the shoreline here, because the loch's frozen over because it's so cold, I've found a few little grasses and reeds underneath the ice. Now the thing with it, ordinarily it wouldn't look that fantastic, but what it's actually got going for it are lots of little air bubbles. And those air bubbles are all dispersed in amongst all the reeds. So it's got a really unique look to it. So I'm getting really tight in. I've got the long lens on. I've got the 100 to 200 on the Fuji GFX. And I've got my camera positions right above, pointing down onto these ice bubbles. Now what I am doing is using a polarizer, because obviously we've got ice and the sun is over this direction and it's just giving that bit of glare on top of the ice. So I'm using that polarizer just to get rid of that and eliminate it as much as possible, because there's no actual reflections that I'm looking to work with. It's basically I want to look through the ice into the bubbles and into the reeds, and that's what makes up the shot. So yeah, that's what I'm going to work with here, is just kind of wait for that. It's not so much about the light with this shot, it's more about the texture and the details. Although we are getting a little bit of light, and it is lighting up some of the greener colours in there, so it is giving a little bit of, how do I put it, definition to the ones that have a bit more light on them. They're a more vibrant green, if that makes sense. So, from the other day, I saw this shot when I was out in the water over there, and I was trying to shoot back towards the mountains, but then I noticed this other shot, and it's basically, if you look off in the distance, there's a tree comes out to the end of a peninsula out there, and that's where I'm kind of focused in on. I quite like the separation that that's got because of the atmosphere behind it, and the shadow or the shade of the mountain range behind that. It separates quite nicely. Now also in the scene, if I press record on here, what you'll see, I've got this set up as a strip pano. So basically what I'm doing is, there's an old dead tree off to the right hand side of the frame, so I'm kind of balancing the two out by putting that dead tree off to the right side, that other tree that's on the peninsula off to the left, and it's kind of in the middle intersection but the left side of it. And then you've got this kind of open space off to the left, which is kind of quite light, and that's adding to that separation in the background there. So basically what I'm doing is I'm lining everything up, just make sure I'm all level. But what you can see has happened is since I started talking to you, of course, the wind has picked up and that glass reflection has now disappeared. It might come back, it's just going to be a case of waiting, but there is a bit more breeze than when we first arrived here. I did manage to get a couple of shots. But basically what I was doing is using that mirror reflection of that old dead tree and that other one on the peninsula there to kind of give me like a double looking image there with using that reflection. The white section of the image, what I was doing is making sure that I get an exposure that makes that area as bright as possible without blowing anything else out. And the reason for that is, I can probably do that in post as well as enhance how bright that is, but the brighter that section is, the more separation it's going to give that tree that's off on the peninsula there, and that's the whole idea of the shot. So simple enough settings for this. I'm at ISO 100 f16, roughly 1/8 of a second is where I was, although to get it right now it would be 1/13 of a second, but it was around about 1/8 of a second because I had slightly more light. You can see the light is kind of moving across. It's kind of overcast today, so we are getting patches of light coming through, but it's just going to be one of those days that we just have to react to the light, and this is one of those shots, so hopefully it's turned out, and here's that shot.